I'm Ramray Naik from Team Pinnacle. I welcome all of you on behalf of Pinnacle. This is our fourth Pinnacle webinar discussion organized in association with the Department of Political Science. I'm very pleased to announce that this initiative, which we had started during the final years of our master's degree in political science a few years back, is now completing 2 years tomorrow, that is 5th of July. So on the account of second anniversary, I extend my warm thanks to all the Pinnacle members, participants who have been also become our regular attendees. Also special thanks us across Goa University who have been supporting us throughout this time, and also Department of Political Science who have been our pillar of strength throughout this time. So thanks to all of those who have backed us so far. And our today's topic is India-China relations, bilateral trade and security concerns. And today we have as a special guest, Sir U. Mahesh Prabhu and Dr. Mukund Narvenkar. And moderator for this session is Gopal Thakur, who is a final year master student at Department of International Relations, Goa University. Gopal also runs a website on international relations and studies, and area studies called nationstatesrelations.com. In addition to that, he also has over 5 years of experience of working in MNCs like Wipro and Dell International Services. I now invite my friend Gopal to take this discussion forward. Over to you, Gopal.
Thank you, Ramray. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. It's been really excellent, opportunity for me that Ramray and his team Pinnacle gave me to moderate this webinar session at the Pinnacle series, web series. We are here once again with our discussion series on the topic that has left people of India and China high and dry. Anyone who has even a minuscule of understanding of global affairs, or who reads or goes through news every other day, knows how India and China stand up at Galwan Valley. India has lost 20 soldiers in a violent clash on 16 June, and the situation still looks gloomy. Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Leh to while the Chinese Foreign Ministry said that India should not act in a way that can raise the temperature at the border. In such an escalated environment and growing number of Wuhan virus cases in India, the anger against China is imminent. Therefore, how the bilateral relationship between India and China pans out is $1 million question. Today's topic, as Ramra has already informed everyone, I'm going to repeat the same, is India-China relations, bilateral trade, security concerns. So to talk on this issue, topic, we have our esteemed guests who excel with their professional and academic works in the area. On the panel today to discuss with us, we have allotted 10 minutes for our panelists to speak, and then we have got some questions from our curious students and audiences who will, which we will take after that. Allow me a few words to introduce them. I'll go with Mr. U. Mahesh Prabhu. He is an internationally published author of 5 books and a seasoned media management and political consultant. He is a founder and a chairman of the US-based Vedic Management Center that aims to present time-tested Vedic teachings in area of leadership, politics, and diplomacy through webinars, courses, podcasts, and publications. He is also a fellow of Royal Asiatic Society, UK, and the member of International Federation of Journalists. I welcome Mr. U. Mahesh Prabhu. And we have Dr. Mukund V. Narvenkar, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, Government College of Arts, Science and Commerce, Sanquelim-Goa. He is his 2019 PhD thesis, Managing India's Maritime Security post-2611 at Goa University, sought to show the importance of maritime domain awareness as a necessary maritime security arrangement for India in the Indian Ocean. He has given various presentations on maritime security issues in India and abroad, such as Sealine of Communications and the Arabian Gulf in War and Peace and War, an Indian perspective, at Combined Service College, UK in September 2008, post-2611, India's coastal security, a perspective at Central University of Gujarat, February 2019, He has published several articles and edited books such as Looking West, Iran and Gulf, Maritime Domain Awareness and a Concept of Security Net of India, and the Maritime Terrorism, the New Threats to Indian Security. To begin with, I would pass this uh, time to Mr. Prabhu to enlighten us with his inputs on the topic today. So over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. So everyone who is on the panel as well as off the panel must have four specific questions logging in their mind. And the first one is, will there be a war between India and China? Second one is, if the war happens, can India win? And the third thing, can we survive by boycotting the Chinese goods? Because most of the products that the Chinese have made have been very less redundant and we don't have an alternative for them. And the fourth one is, what will be the end result of all these conflicts? Now, this topic is, you cannot look at in a specific time zone. This is not something that has occurred just overnight. We have had this problem with China. But before that, what we need to understand is that India and China are the world's oldest civilizations. We have coexisted for over 2,500 years. We have had cultural exchanges. The Buddhism in China was presented to, went to the China through to Bodhidharma, and we always had a cordial relationship with that country. The escalation with China happened after the entering of Mao Zedong as the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party. So it is important how the Mao came to be, and so I'll not take much time, but I'll give you some brief historical references. In 1912, the Chinese Xinhai Revolution, I hope I'm saying it right, uprooted the Qing dynasty. And there was a very democratic and a nationalist government that came into China. And the China was then called as Republic of China. In 1949, Mao Zedong, a communist Marxist revolutionary, by using his guerrilla forces and with absolute brutal tactics, he uprooted this Republic of China government and made it limited to the current day Taiwan. Taiwan, even today, introduces itself as Republic of China. Whereas the mainland China, dominated by the communists, is called as People's Republic of China. And when Zedong came to power, he created a lot of problems within the China as well as external China. We call Hitler as a mass murderer because he killed 2 million Jews. But the greatest butcher of all time, whose policies have killed many people, is Mao Zedong, who has himself alone killed approximately 17 million Chinese in the name of cultural revolutions. Now, these killings might have not happened on the edge. Not every killing was happened at an order at a gunpoint, but some of the most disastrous consequences came after him. Now, Mao died somewhere in 1976, and he was succeeded by his colleague, who was diametrically opposite to him. And he was a true visionary of a sort. He was an absolute statesman. And his name was Deng Xiaoping. So when Deng Xiaoping became the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, he did what we can say in the Western perspective. He differentiated between the church and the state. He said that the Chinese Communist Party must be an independent party, and there must be a different government, okay, which will be having a president. And that president will follow it took a lot of inspiration from the American system, where the tenure will be for 4 years each, and a person cannot be a president for more than 2 terms. Along with this, Deng Xiaoping also brought in a radical new approach. He said that while we will continue to remain as socially communist, as economically we will be capitalist. And that's how the special economic zone idea came into the being. And that is the very reason why the China rose stupendously high in the economic sector and why it has become a very threat to the very United States today. Deng Xiaoping was a visionary. he was a communist, but he was definitely a visionary. He was selfless. He could have been the president of the China, so but he refused, and he let others, to take that position willingly. And once the presidential system came into the being, he quietly resigned. And there is a story that when in 1990, when Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao became the Prime Minister of India, and he went to China as a head of state, he asked for meeting Deng Xiaoping. And the Deng Xiaoping's answer was that I have retired from the life. I have nothing much to offer. So the Prime Minister of India must not waste much time on an old man like me. So what made China powerful? What made China an economic success? If there is one person they have to thank to, it is Deng Xiaoping. In 2013, President Xi Jinping came to the power in China. And in 2020, his tenure should have ended. So by now, we should have had a new president in China. But Deng Xiaoping ruthlessly killed, slaughtered almost any of the people who could have given him a serious threat within China. And all of his policies have been extremely ruthless. And I'm sure if there is a serious investigation, he could be, if all the countries come together, he could be tried for a lot of not just human rights violation, but crimes against humanity. How many people have been killed as a result of his approach and policy is still not clear. Until 2019 or 2020 February, US presidents were clear that there was no other way but to keep with China, and they have to be with China. But after the entering of COVID-19, where President Xi's direct involvement to manipulate the WHO came on the clear, and then also they had what is called as OBOR, One Belt, One Road initiative, where essentially he wanted to create the old Silk Road, but enlarge and build upon it, and also include the sea routes. He started giving money to the governments in this region to build infrastructure which were to be developed by the Chinese industries themselves. So it is like, I will give you loan to pay me to do some work to you. So the money comes to me, and over that the interest for anything that is inclusive in that, okay, you have to pay me. So you are getting nothing, but you are getting a debt. And we saw this in Hibuntuta in Sri Lanka, where the entire Sri Lankan government had to relinquish the entire infrastructure to him. In South China Sea, the China is building, has found some extremely high reserves of petrochemical reserves. So to stake the claim, they have started building superficial island, and they have made enemies everywhere. They have the South China Sea, entire nation, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and most importantly, Japan, and even Malaysia are very concerned about the rise of China. So one of the drastic steps the US President Trump took, along with the senator from Texas, Ted Cruz, was to bring in a series of legislation. They are still not stopped, it's all going. And every industry from the US is moving out of China. Some of them will go back to US, but some others just can't because of technical reason. Now, these industries are coming to India. Now, why China is doing what it is doing, maybe for two reasons. One, they want to tell the American industry that India is vulnerable. So by telling them that, okay, this India is not as safe as you think, and we could create problems for you there by creating troubles for the government, they may try to thwart it. But that ship has long passed. There is a extreme consensus across the US political and business and other spectrum that China has to be contained. The most important thing which I feel is necessary to understand here is that if there is a war, okay, like there was a war in 1912 where the Qin dynasty was finished off. There was a war in 1949 when the Republic of China lost and it was limited to Taiwan. If the China goes ahead with the war, they are going to lose it, okay? And there is no way that they are going to win it. There is one interesting leak or a cable, if you go to the CIA website, which clearly states that there are clear indicators to the fact that the President Xi Jinping doesn't take the People's Liberation Army or a PLA very seriously. As we have seen in the Galwan Valley, we lost 20 soldiers, but our 20 soldiers, without a bare bullets or anything, they were able to slay almost 40 of the Chinese soldiers. And China has admitted to this fact. So with the confronting with the Indian troops who has had decades of insurgency experience, they are going to have a very tough time. And even if they win, what are they going to get out of it? Nothing much. Their economy is already devastated, so there will be more sanctions against them. US will be more than happy to stand by India and go ahead with that. However, everything said and done, every nation is head of state wants to solve this without a war, and they don't have any specific plan as of now. Now, in one of the a couple of the US senators and Indian politicians, I had suggested this idea, which I think they will eventually adapt. The idea is very simple. We shouldn't really confront. I think Modi is doing a phenomenal job of placing the army and giving them the free hand to handle the situation the way they want in case of an escalation. So there is no, training club kind of a scenario. I think what needs to be done is that the Prime Minister Modi needs to take a very serious stage at this level. And what he has to do is that he must recognize the Republic of China government or the Taiwanese government as a legitimate ruler of the mainland China. And then the Republic of China must acknowledge the Tibet as an independent nation, and Lobsang Sangye, the current Tibetan Prime Minister, must be recognized as its head of state. Then the Hong Kong must be given a free rein. Now, this will be a paperwork, okay? It will be a paper tiger plan, but China will be on the defensive. And where is China weak is that it has no, every of its game is always confrontation. They have always failed in diplomacy. They have not really achieved anything. We have seen it in Doklam when last time they did the similar thing. They had no option but to withdraw. But Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, was very kind. He gave them a leeway. He said that, okay, fine, we'll withdraw at the same time. So neither you lose nor either I lose. So it will be a win-win situation. But now that situation is out of hand. So if you can create a diplomatic, you can send a salvos of diplomatic things like this. There is already an uprising within China. The people are not happy. There is a lot of persecution in that. And the entire People's Liberation Army is nothing but stormtroopers of the Chinese Communist Party, who all that they can do right now is to subjugate or limit the access to keep their people in check. So when you start a diplomatic salvos, there will be an incentive for the people within the Chinese Communist Party or within the mainland China to take on these bullies in the Chinese Communist Party. The threat to India or the world is not the China or the Chinese people. It is the People's Republic of China. And specifically speaking, it is the President Xi Jinping and his stormtroopers, the People's Liberation Army. So I hope I have made some good points here. So thank you for your opportunity.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Mahesh Prabhu. It was very insightful, the historic background and the conduct of Chinese PLA and the Xi Jinping's for the plan. Now I pass on the mic to Dr. Narvenkar. So you have to unmute. You have to unmute your mic, sir.
Okay, yeah, got it. So, am I audible to you?
Very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, fine. Very good afternoon, Mr. Mahesh.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, and at outset, let me first thank the organizing team of Pinnacle, Goa University, and the Department of Political Science for giving me this opportunity so that I can share some thought on the current issue. Well, so let me just broadly categorize what I'm going to speak about. I will not bore you. This won't be a lecture, but as a teacher, I'm always constrained to certain structure. So I'll go with the structure which I've prepared just to put the entire points in place. So I'll begin with the introduction about the topic. Then I'll talk about my 3 hypotheses which I've drawn out. We'll try and test whether these hypotheses really stand firm on the current issue or not. Then I'm specifically going to speak about India's security concern, which Mahesh have rightly address. Then I'll briefly talk about trade issues, which is happening right now, or the impact on India-China trade, and then maybe a last comment, concluding remarks. Well, so when we talk about India-China, we have to remember that this year we are celebrating 70th years of anniversary of establishing a diplomatic tie with China. And these 70 years, we have seen a lot of ups and downs. We have seen border conflict in 1962. There was a Sikkim skirmish in 1967. Then we have a Chu Valley skirmish in 1987 and Doklam standoff, which was recently in 2017. Now, besides these all ups and downs, we also have some disagreement when it comes to share borders, differences when it comes to Dalai Lama, then China's security cooperation with Pakistan, trade, and evolving geopolitics in South Asia as well as Asia as a whole. So with this introduction, I think I'll focus on my hypothesis. So I have three hypotheses as far as this issue is concerned. The first hypothesis, let me get it very straight, that China believes in power politics. We have to accept that China believes in power politics and its own national interest as a security. And therefore, Beijing's vision for Asia is strictly hierarchical, with China is at top, and China, for some extent, does not even consider India as an equal. So that's the first hypothesis. Second hypothesis is that it has recognized India's historical influence in South Asia, its capability as a regional power, its global potential, and therefore Beijing's policy towards India has largely followed the pattern of balancing India by promoting and developing ties with some small countries around India. And the third very important hypothesis is that China wants to prevent an Indian-US alignment in Asia, which is right now happening. Specifically, I'm talking about the Indo-Pacific Forum. So these are my three hypotheses, and subsequent talk would be in and around this hypothesis. So coming back to a core issue, the security concern. Now, when we talk about India-China with the recent standoff at the Galwan Valley or Eastern Ladakh, we have to see the broader perspective. Now, one cannot understand India-China only keeping with Galwan Valley at the forepoint. Rather, we need to see how things are changing and evolving in and around India, in and around Indian Ocean, in and around Asia Pacific. And therefore, I would like to draw your attention first with the major development which happened in South China Sea. And South China Sea is quite visible, where China by its own played a very hegemonic role by denying the exclusive economic zone to a lot of these small countries. And once China established the hegemonic rule in South China Sea, now China is trying to enter into Indian Ocean and Asia Pacific. And therefore, why China is doing so? It's only because to expand its reach, only for safeguarding its national interest. Now, coming back to this topic, the current border dispute therefore has a wider perspective and implications for India as well as region. So before we get into this wider perspective, we just have to briefly talk about what happened after 62. Now, 62 is considered to be a very important turning point when it comes to India-China relationship. Now, 1962, we have seen the border conflict, and in fact, after 62, there has been series of various skirmishes until 1988, and that include all those crises, including Sikkim or Chu Valley, all those major events. Now, 1998 became an ice-breaking moment because then Prime Minister of India, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, made a very important visit to China, and that opened a new horizon when it comes to the diplomatic relationship between these two countries. That immediately followed in 1996 when we had an agreement on confidence building measure, which basically talked about managing the borders between these two nations. And in fact, recently when this crisis happened, 1996 always been brought into the picture by India when it comes to maintaining the border without arms. Well, now coming back to the current conflict, what we have now, what China is doing, China is following the same strategy which they have applied, or rather they have adopted in the Doklam. Now, what they did in Doklam was very simple. They have, first they grab your territory, and then they try to balance, or they try to blame others. Now, this has also been a tested strategy for China because they have done it in South China Sea. And we have seen how today South China Sea has become the Chinese-dominated area altogether. And they want to apply the same formula today in Himalayan border. Now, we have to see whether they really get success in the long run or not. That's a question which we need to debate later. Well, now there is another perspective why this conflict is building today when it comes to India-China in the Galwan Valley. And many writers in open media have been talked about that it may be because of COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the question is how COVID-19 is related to border conflict in India. Well, there were reports in the media regarding there's an unrest or unhappiness among the people and especially Chinese Communist Party over mishandling of COVID by Xi Jinping. And probably this is an act to divert that attention from growing pressure in the party as well as in Chinese community. And moreover, we have to understand that this is a very sinister plan by China to grab more territory. Well, let me quote here again the Prime Minister of Tibet in exile, Mr. Lobsang Sangye, and he rightly have said this, and let me quote him, that he said that the recent adventurism is a part of an expansionist design. Politically, whenever China have some internal tensions or problems, you want to distract of external problems. You can see from South China Sea to Hong Kong to Taiwan and to 3,488 kilometers border between Tibet and India. And after Tibet was occupied by the Chinese forces, the Chinese leader, including Mao Zedong, have said that Tibet is a palm and the 5 fingers are Ladakh, Sikkim, Nepal, Bhutan, and Arunachal Pradesh. So this broadly, we can understand that how China is trying to create a mindset of an expansionist, that they want to grab more territory. Well, so now the question is, how do I interpret the current security situation, or how do we interpret the current security situation between India and China? Now, there are a couple of points which I have just listed out. First, let us assume that if India does not react to the Chinese unilateral change in status quo, and if don't react, then it will set up a new precedent, because China have done the similar things in South China Sea. So therefore, India have to react. Now, how India reacts, we have to wait and see how it happens. Second very important thing is that China follows the policy of deception, and this is a wonderful policy which they have been implementing since Doklam. So what they do, that they would open up the channel for a discussion to de-escalate the entire issue, but they will buy a time to expand and construct its own permanent structure. So this is a wonderful policy which China has come up with, something called deception. Now, third, they have already done that, as I said, in the Doklam. And in Doklam, they did the same thing, that they took first 2 steps forward, and when the de-escalation process began, they took 1 step backward. Although they have taken 1 step backward, they still control certain areas in Doklam. We have to understand, and we have to accept it, that although there are de-escalation from the both sides, what happened in Doklam, but China as of now have permanent structure in Doklam and they have a control over it. So this is another wonderful policy which China has accepted or rather adopted so far. Now, when it comes to Galwan Valley is a strategic and strategically close to the Indian air base at Daulat Beg Oldi. In fact, with this intrusion in Indian territory, the entire strategic road from Daulat Beg Oldi to Darbuk is now wide open for China. And this road from Daulat Beg Oldi to Darbuk is a strategically very important road, because this road connects India to Karakoram Pass and the glaciers. Now, this is very important. And this has become the thorn in Chinese flesh. Now, one also need to understand that the broader perspective and the strategic interest of China in Pakistan. And therefore, China is obviously skeptical about this road. Now, if at all, if this escalate, let us assume that if at all the current crisis in Galwan Valley escalate, then what are we going to see? Where we have to understand here that anything less than total victory, please remember this, anything less than total victory would be a strategic debacle, not only for India, but as well as for China. So for both countries, the current crisis are very important from a different perspective. let us assume from a Chinese perspective, because if China managed to get a total victory over here, that obviously China's strength, China's power, China's total dominance would be seen not only just in South Asia or in Asia, but obviously in the world. Similarly, as far as India is concerned, it is very important that we don't lose it, because it has a domestic political political inspiration, as well as it will have some impact on a current government, as well as how do we see and whether are we making the same mistake which we have done way back in 1962. So therefore, current crisis is very, very important when it comes to both India and China. Now, let me come back to the very important aspect, which is trade. Now, how does the trade is between India and China? Well, we have to accept that China is the largest trading partner in India. In fact, it ranks at number 1, obviously then followed by US, UAE, and Saudi Arabia and XYZ countries. Well, from April 2019 to March 2020, the total export which we carried out between India and China was 65 billion. That means the total export from China to India was 65 billion, which nearly accounts to 14% of India's total import. In the same year, the total export from India to China was just 16.6 billion. Now, when you compare this data, then we get to know that this accounts to total 81.6 billion trade between these two countries. So imagine at a trade front, we are doing wonderful. Now, whether we are getting the benefit of this, that will come to know soon, because the current deficit of this year is 48.8 billion. Now, we have to remember that although the trade between these two countries amounts to 81 billion, but when it comes to how much does China take things from India, it is just 16 billion, and how much do we take from China is 65 billion. So the trade deficit is 48.4 billion as of now, which is not good for India's interest. Well, so what does we basically export from China? What does China export to India? Well, we basically caters to electronic and machinery, chemical products, metal, textile, plastic, and rubber. This is what we import from China. And what do we export to China? Again, in the same area, we export electronics, machinery, chemical products in lesser number. In fact, the very important point, what we need to understand the impact on trade here is that if tomorrow some decisions have been taken and it is really going to affect Indian trade, then the industry which is going to affect is pharmaceuticals, because we have to remember that between 70 to 90% of API, that is active pharmaceuticals ingredient needed for pharma industry, comes from China. So therefore, trade is a very, very important aspect. So when it comes to a greater picture, for China, India stands at 18th position in the total trade index, whereas for India, China stands at number 1. Now, coming back to another very important point of trade is investment, FDI. Now, China's FDI has grown 5-fold since 2014 as of December 2019, and its cumulative investment in India is around $8 billion, which is far more than investment which has come from any countries sharing the border with India. Well, as far as the Brookings India reports is concerned, the total current and planned Chinese investment in India has crossed $26 billion. So you can imagine how much China is investing in India. So therefore, we also have to keep trade into the perspective when it comes to understanding India-China conflict. Now, whereas India's cumulative investment in China, we have seen a drop in recent past. In fact, till 2019, it has dropped to $0.92 billion compared to $1.9 billion in the year 2018. So we may not invest much into the China, but Chinese are heavily investing in India. Now, the question here is, what is the impact or implication of conflict over the trade? Well, we have to accept that the tension is building up at the border. What is more concerning is the economic fallout of the soaring relationship between the two countries. This is because the economic interdependence of the two neighbors, because we have been depending on China very largely, and therefore we cannot ignore it. So thus the immediate impact will be on the investment front, especially on Indian startups and unicorns. I just list out here that because India's startup company, okay, are totally depending on Chinese funding. Example, companies like Paytm, Zomato, Big Basket, Dream11, Delivery Policy Bazaar, and XYZ. There are in fact 90 startups which today Chinese are investing in India with $4 billion of investment. And moreover, 18 of the country's top 30 unicorn are totally funded by Chinese investment. So therefore now, broadly speaking, there are basically two perspectives when it comes to positive implication of this crisis as well as negative implication. Let me talk about first negative implication. If at all, if this escalates to a different level, what we are going to have a negative impact. Well, Chinese products forms a critical part of the supply chain for India, basically for many firms which are into manufacturing sector. With the economy struggling to recover from the pandemic, any potential escalation between these two nations would escalate operational as well as the supply chain risk. India can look to find alternatives. Yes, we need to find alternatives for a Chinese product, but such a step would be tedious and expensive at a short period of time. Therefore, we need to have a long policy. Now, which are those key sectors where the impact would be quite visible? The first is pharmaceutical, as I said, because India gets 70% of its active pharmaceutical ingredient used in drugs from China, and a disruption in that would adversely affect the sector. So pharmaceutical would be the first area which will take hit if at all this escalate to a different level. Second is very important sector, which is consumer durable goods. India is heavily dependent on China for components for consumer durables. Third is auto industry, because China is a key supplier of subcomponent used in engine, electronics, tires, and etc. Fourth sector would be a telecom, because China catered to a majority of our smartphone demand in India and even globally. Therefore, any disruption will result in a spike in a smartphone prices and probably will lead to a delay in the adoption of a new technology such as 5G. Fifth area which would affect because of this conflict would be power supply. Well, India imports a vast portion of its solar modules from China, so we have to remember this, it will affect. Similarly, sixth category and the last would be our chemicals and agrochemicals area, because the Indian agrochemical industry imports high amount of raw material from China. So these are the key factors which will see an impact on our trade, on our economy, if this leads to a different level. Now, what is the positive implication? We also have to see the positive implication. Well, this is, in fact, is a great opportunity for the startups in India to rise up to the occasion and build products and services for making India more self-dependent. Now, the key infrastructure products which right now have been allotted to Chinese firm could also come to Indian firm, and as a result of this escalation. And we have to see that if positively, if you see this, it is a wonderful opportunity for our startups to look into the better prospect. But for that, we need a better policy. We need some strong backing to support these startups, to support these small-scale industries, so that we achieve something end of the day. Well, to conclude the entire and to summarize what I spoke about, now we have to understand that India should not allow any status quo change in Himalayan border, and we must reverse the situation and force China to back out or get into the back foot area. Well, rather than war, we must take diplomacy much seriously. As rightly my co-panelists have said, yes, the free hand is being given to the army, and army would do their job as they're supposed to. But at the political front, we must have, I won't use that word, but I would say we must have a political guts to name China for what it is doing as of now, and therefore the diplomatic solution would be the only problem, because we have already seen that we have lost 20 lives. Similarly, at international level, India should stand for Hong Kong. We need to open our options to contain China, if at all, if you want to. And therefore, Hong Kong would be a wonderful opportunity because it will benefit India economically as well as diplomatically. Similarly, India must stand for Taiwan. And in short, India should closely work with US when it comes to keeping its own interest in Indo-Pacific Forum. Similarly, India should also raise the human rights issues which has been happening in Xinjiang province in China. Similarly, India should also strengthen its naval and military relationship Vietnam, Japan, and South Korea, because these are the three countries in the Southeast of Asia which are very, very important in terms of economy, technology, as well as militarily. So therefore, we have to look into that aspect. And to second last, very important, at trade front, at trade and economic front, we need to get back to our basics. And when I say when we need to get back to our basics, I'm basically talking about that the much stress has to be given to the concept called made in India. I'm not talking about make in India, I'm talking about made in India. We need to protect our industry. We need to give them some kind of a protection so that they grow here. Obviously, Make in India is a wonderful policy, but rather we need to get back to the basics. That is, made in India is much better, because if we allow our company to grow in India, then obviously in times to come, maybe 10 years down the line, maybe 15 years down the line, or maybe even 20 years down the line, we may have our own brand. Like today, the way we Chinese have a brand, we can have our own brand in various sectors so that we can take a big jump like any other nations have done since the economic liberalization. And the last very important observation, I would say, or a concluding remark, that government need to support and protect all our MSMEs, because the micro, small and medium enterprises are the real backbone of our economy. And therefore, to summarize the entire India and China relationship, from security concern as well as to trade, these are some of my observations which I have listed out. So that's it. And thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Narvenkar. It was a really good holistic understanding of India-China bilateral relationship regarding trade and security. And I'm sure everyone listening to this would have been really, really helpful in getting the insights of the real situation right now. So therefore, now the webinar is open for the questions. If anybody has any question, comments, or he wants to speak, please drop in the comment section that you want to speak or you have a comment. And I have collected a couple of questions from the audiences. This one question, which is directed to Dr. Narvenkar, is one of the audiences has been asking that what will be the impact if we close all the relations with China? At what point China will begin war against India? Who are those countries will help help us in Indo-China war? What are the solutions to solve current problems with China? This is one question from one of our audience. And I too have a couple of questions that I want to ask.
Okay.
So I'll start with you, Dr. Narvenkar. It's a simple question. Shouldn't be. I think you have touched that point that I was thinking of asking. You talk about Hong Kong issue, right? And we've been going through in last couple of months that the Hong Kong issue, the Taiwan issue, say Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, Tibet, all the issues, everything has been a talking point over the internet. People are talking, people are kind of resenting them, the occupation of Chinese occupation in these areas. So in a couple of, in last week or so, India initiated a diplomatic, action in the United Nations regarding, the peaceful movement, or kind of encirclement of China strategically or diplomatically at the UN forum. So my question is that how do you think that these efforts or the actions going to impact China in a lasting manner? We also have to consider that when we talk about India-China relations, the issues of the war that we had 62 war, we have skirmish in 67, then we have in 85, then Doklam, and then this one, Galwan Valley. Every issue, everywhere, apart from 62, there has not been all-out war. So do you really think that these issues really can impact China in a lasting situation, in a lasting environment? And I have one question to Mr. Prabhu. Sir, I'll go with this. India and China trade relation goes very deep today, as Dr. Narvenkar said. Bilateral trade between these two Asian giants goes over $86 billion, which India imports close to $70 billion, $65 billion what Dr. Narvenkar quoted right now. India imports ranges of items like from power sector, social media to each and everything. Majorly, India-China trade relations goes to business environment. It does not, I would not say directly, but indirectly, yes, to the business to customer, but majorly into the business to business environment. So my question is that when Prime Minister talks about Atmanirbhar Bharat, and when China plays such a big impact on the economy, how do you think the government is going to replace that void? Where that money will come into India when China is not investing, and understanding the fact that US, Donald Trump has been so very skeptical about his national agenda, which is, again, many people are saying that US is going backward to the old isolationism. So how do you think that these things going to be filled? So you can answer one by one.
Okay, so can I
Sure,
can I
sure.
get in?
Yeah, you
Yeah,
should.
of course.
All right, fine. So I'll take that question first of yours, then I'll take the other question. Well, when it comes to Hong Kong and how does India see entire development? Well, we have to first accept that China is going to be there forever, whether it's a Republic of China or it's Communist of China. We won't be able to have a different perspective on China as of now. A very important point here, we need to understand that why India need to be with Hong Kong or for that Taiwan. We have to see our chances of taking on to China. See, we already have lost one leverage with what we had with China, that is Tibet, obviously. So that is one of the fault lines what we had way back. Now we need to find a ways to engage China, because these incursion or intrusion into Indian territory is going to be a continuous process, because I don't think so China is going to stand quiet with one Galvan or one Doklam. They are going to test India at every front, at every border area, just to see the soft target. And therefore, at internationally, if we really need to contain, and again, let me use this word, that containment is a very old idea of Cold War era, where you would contain. Today, we are living in a globalized world. We have to accept that whether we are good with China or not, technically, as you rightly said, business will continue. And therefore, we have to find ways wherein we can have something on the table to discuss. That is very important. Therefore, the forum which is evolving right now called Indo-Pacific or quadrangle system which is evolving right now between India, we have Japan, we have Australia, we have America. And if we keep that as a base, then we can interact with many other countries. Now, we have to remember, when it comes to China, China has a problem with most of its neighbors. And therefore, we have to find that way wherein at international level, if we can contain China in United Nations and make China believe that they are really doing a bad job and they have to go back, they have to give up their claim on Galvan Valley, then we need international support. Right now, if you see what is the European Union stand on China, that hardly any European nation have criticized China when it comes to its escalation into India. And why is this so? Because entire Europe today is still depending on China. China, even today, whether it's a COVID-19 or any viruses for that matter, or whether the Third World War takes place, as of now, entire world is depending on China because China is a manufacturing hub. And even rightly in India, whether we cut off the all relationship with China or not, that will not solve problem. We have to take everything at a one time, but there has to be an objective of a long run plan of a 10 years, 20 years plan, so that we achieve systematically one by one when it comes to border issue, when it comes to trade deficit, or when it comes to rising China as a superpower or the challenge to India or not. So the point what I'm trying to make here is that we have to work together, because these two countries, as rightly my co-panelists have said, we are age-old civilizations. We have this context since 2,500 years. For small issues, we cannot resist to the war. War is not a solution to entire thing. And again, let me put it here that even if something goes wrong and if this escalates, it would be a local war, it would be limited war, because both India and China knows that we cannot expect to have an escalation at this point of time, especially when the entire world and especially India and China is facing the great pandemic of COVID-19. So therefore, we need to find the voices, we need to find the support in these countries, and therefore Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea for that matter, in Japan for that matter, Australia for that matter, these countries are very important to maintain some pressure over the China at that international forum. Again, let me bring on to another very important point when it comes to China. We also have to see how China is acting since COVID-19, whether the issues between the trade war, in fact, between US and China will continue for a long time, or now we have become a part of it. We have to see how it's going to evolve. And therefore, what matters right now is a policy. We just have to wait and watch, but we have to make sure that this doesn't escalate to another level, because it will be very bad. Because not only bad for our soldiers, but let me tell you, a lot of people today are into business directly connected to the Chinese. We are going to have a terrible time if it escalates to next level, because we'll have unemployment, and already we have seen that unemployment is shooting up like anything. We have to find a ways out. This is not a time to show who's more powerful. This is not a time to show who has a more muscle. It is more about getting onto the table, discussed, be firm on your decision, and bring peace. That is more important. So I think this would be the answer to the second question which you have raised. As far as, again, the first question which you have raised about whether there would be a war, I would say no. As I said, war is not a solution. If at all war is going to happen, it would be limited war. Now, when it comes to how many countries are going to support us, let me be very frank. When it comes to war, you have to fight your own war. You know, nobody would send the army. Yeah, they may support you politically, they may support you militarily with kind of a technology what you need, or some weapons, but end of the day, we are going to lose our own men. Chinese are going to lose their own men. And it is not a question of how many we killed theirs and how many we have lost. End of the day, it is bringing something on a peace. So war is not at all solution. Well, the next very important part of the question was, can we stop all the trade with China? No, not at all. We have to find the ways out. See, we are living in a globalized world. Today, we cannot live in isolation. We may not like China, but we have to interact with China. Secondly, when it comes to trade, again, let me come to the same point. Trade is the only way through which these two countries can bring something on the table. We have done this since 1990 onwards. It is not that we never had a border issues with China after 62. We had series of border issues, but the border issues have been kept aside and the focus was more given to the trade. And therefore, we need to find ways through the trade, and therefore, in short, war is not a solution. A total contamination in China is obviously not a solution. We have to reach out to the China with the trade, and we have to negotiate in a way that how does it benefit? Because if you see the current deficit, it is 48 billion. We are not gaining much, but at grassroots level, there are thousands of people which are connected to the companies which are Chinese are investing. If they stop that investment, we'll have a great problem in China. Therefore, we need to have a policy, and policy of a long run, keeping 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in a pipeline so that we build our industry. Then I think once economically we are strong, we can achieve a lot of things. Yeah.
So thank you for that question. The first thing what I would like to bring into the factor is that there is a pandemic in the offing, and China is standing all alone in the world with no friends as we speak. The European Union used to be a good friend of China until their debt trap came in. You have seen it recently in Italy, how the Prime Minister was initially very supportive of China, but eventually how he started went lambasting against China eventually. With debt traps, the China has created enemy with every nation, be that Sri Lanka, South China Sea nation. Malaysia doesn't want to do anything with China on the commercial front. And that the fact that the communist China or the People's Republic of China is a trouble is a bygone conclusion by all the head of states globally. The question is now what to do. Who will bell the cat? That is the issue. Can we sever the trade with China? No, we just can't do that. It's not realistic. We can cut it to a great extent, but it will happen. In this regard, I would want to bring in one interesting perspective. In the previous 2016 election in the United States, everybody was enjoying Donald Trump, but nobody thought he will win. And for some reason, I happen to be the only analyst who said that he will win. And when it came, I got some seriousness from the business people. And everybody asked me, why do you think he would win? Okay, why did you thought that he will win? The answer is very simple. The globalization, the concept of globalization. Globalization is very different from capitalism. So capitalism is life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. You have a very fair chance to pursue what you think is right and how you want to go about it. But in the pursuit of all this globalization, the great many American presidents have poked their nose in the economies of others. And that has led to a lot of catastrophic things. Every time a company was opened in China, several businesses, several job losses had occurred in United States. As of today, even though there is a lot of unrest within the United States, it is pretty certain that Donald Trump is going to win back for a very simple reason that everything that he's doing, especially there is a legislation which is going to be passed in US Senate shortly, where all the essential drugs, life-saving drugs, will no more be manufactured in China or anywhere else, but in US alone. And these actions are already helping them to create the jobs. And when you have the jobs, you naturally have the votes, and you will win. The Democrats are not doing good. So that Trump will win, although in a very bloody election year, I think is a reality. Although I don't have I'm not a great fan of his. Now, if Trump comes back, what will be his strategy is what will decide the outcome of this, because like it or not, the greatest powerful army on earth, powerful army on earth is not China, it is the United States of America. It is the key player in the decision how the world is, where the world is going to be. China will not dare to make any more incursion. What their tactics have been is all well understood. As my co-panelist has already said, that what they do is they create a deception. They'll say that we'll go, but then they create a bunker and they will keep their army down there. So now the question about the Chinese investments. We all speak about all the great $1 million investment that the Chinese have made in India and everything. That has been one of my portion of specialty as an investor. And I always found that the entire investment what the Chinese have actually made is much lesser than what it actually looks. There is a subject called as financial engineering. So what it says is, how do you create the valuation model? Now imagine you have 1,000 rupees in your pocket and you want to show that your company is, 1 crore worth. So what you do is you float a company and you buy 0.1% of the share, or or 0.5% of the share for 1,000 rupees. So going by the logic, if 0.5% is 1,000 rupees, how much is 100%? You will get a higher evaluation. But the higher evaluation is no guarantee that there is something significant has happened. China has made a huge, significant amount of whitewashing by using these tactics. That is the reason why none of the so-called startups, be that Zomato or anything, they have not created the kind of employment they could have created. Okay, and all the investments have often been given as a high-grade salary, like 1 crore, 2 crore to the CEOs, whereas all the people working on down the ground, sometimes they have not even followed some of the basic employment legislations in the country. So who benefited from it? It's by propaganda, the Chinese, that, oh, the Chinese have money. When the pandemic started, the first thing the Prime Minister of India did, along with the Finance Minister, is to block all landlocked countries' investment into India. Now, here's the interesting thing. If that money had come to India, there have been speculations by very senior investors in the stock market that Ambani would have had a clean walk. He would have got the money, Chinese would have invested in Jio, and the 5G contract would have naturally gone to Huawei. And the problem that Ambani is in right now, that he has to repay a debt of 1,50,000 crore, and he has only been able to raise 80,000 crore with all the the gimmicks and the circus, shows that a lot of industries are going to be failing. Okay? The reliance is no more on the clear. If you are a very astute person, you can see that The Reliance said that they had received 50,000 crores from the Facebook. Okay, but 50,000 crore is just the EMI they have to pay for 12 months which they have taken from the bank, and they have not paid the EMI until now. They only paid the interest. Now, when Prime Minister says Atmanirbhar Bharat, he is saying that because the industries as we know it today, the exorbitant evaluation, the things like what Tata did of buying Tetley and Jaguar Land Rover and only to lose more money, or even what Mahindra did in buying that automotive company in South Korea, which is now reeling under severe loss. All these companies in the next 2 years are going to collapse significantly. They are going to be very much diminished, and there is no doubts about it. The hypothetical game of financial evaluation has failed, and it is going to cost all these people high. The one good thing what has happened in the pandemic is that a great many labor force, people who would come from Uttar Pradesh, Cuttack, Orissa, and other places, they have gone back to their villages. Now they don't want to come back to the city. Even in places like Bombay and Delhi, most people are without, they have been left to lurch at such a long time that I don't think a great many of them will come back. So a lot of businesses will suffer, the employment will go. Now, what are you going to do with these people? You have to give them employment. So how do you do that? That is the whole idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat. It is not about giving our startups and everything impetus, because our startups, like it or not, they are not delivered on the way they wanted. People lost jobs in IT industry and they started a startup and they made some hullabaloo. Media magazine, made a big hue and cry over it. Awards were given, rewards were given, but our startup industry has not taken up at all. So now what we have to do is we have to save our economy. And to save our economy, we have a good rain in monsoon in India this year. We need to ensure that we have a food security. We have to go down to basics. This next 2-3 years, there will be no serious profits anywhere happening anywhere in the world. Neither the pharma industry, neither anyone is going to do that. So the idea that the Chinese investment can save us is actually false, because Chinese investment has never helped any Indian thing. And all the misinformation that is available is because in India, we don't really use the analysis very seriously. We say that, Mr. Zuckerberg is giving 50,000 crores to Ambani. We don't even ask that whether that money is going to come in shares. Is he going to trade off his shares worth 50,000 crores in the New York Stock Exchange as a compensation or what? So the Chinese investment doesn't matter anymore. And wherever the Chinese investment happened, if you go to Canada, if you go to Calgary, if you go to the places like Toronto, all the expat Chinese have brought the land there. And what has happened is that although the land prices have been extremely appraised, the locals, the basic Canadians, the Indian Canadians and the people from other part of the world, they are not able to buy the place. Worse, if they don't sell the place, the cost of living has gone so high that people are struggling so hardly to even pay to stay afloat. So given all this, all that I'm trying to say is that, one, China cannot afford a war, because if it goes on a war, it will make all the country to be, to join forces with India. And we have seen that in one of the Independence Day, Republic Day parade, we had all the South China Sea nations head of state and ASEAN nations head of state being a part of it to show to China that, you don't really have it everything. And diplomacy, because the China takes that art of war, Sun Tzu, rather too seriously and goes for a confrontation everywhere. Everybody doubts about China, whereas India, we don't have to give it the credit to Modi, but all to the prime ministers from the day one, that we have been always looked as a benevolent nation, that we want to exist, we want to live, and we let live. The China's idea that it is a threat to the world economy is clear. So if it makes any escalation, it will lose. It has already lost 200 of the major industries there. If you see that the Samsung phones and advanced latest tablets are not available in India, because they have stopped its production in China, and they are now doing it already in their Indian factory in the NCR region, which is already functional. So every fundamentals that we had thought that was the China's strength has turned it into its weakness. And we cannot see the world anymore the day the lockdown began. When the lockdown began, the world as we knew it has changed. That is the reason why there's a lot of chaos. People are not able to decode it. It is now there is not a time for profits. It is a time for survival. And as our ancestors have said, there is enough for the need, but never for the greed. China went for the greed. It has the largest US dollar reserve. It has got something around 3 trillion US dollar reserve. It is cash rich, no doubts about that. But even that is not going to help it on the long run, because now somebody has to take a fall for all the millions of lives suffering. The economy is crushing because of pandemics. Somebody has to pay a price, and it is going to be the People's Republic of China as a government and not as the Chinese as a people, because Chinese people have suffered worse than what the world is suffering right now. So I hope I have made my answers pretty clear. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was very insightful. I have a couple of audiences who wants to speak. I think Norman was there. Norman, are you there?
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Just a second. So I wanted to make a note of, like, there is many trade companies like Big Basket in India, the largest grocery market, which almost a 40% share stock is this one, Alibaba, and not even that, even Ola, Zomato, Flipkart. The major investment is done by the Chinese company. So to boycott Chinese company nowadays, I think India will have to face a tremendous problem. And even like if one option, like if we note, like today it's a South Korean company app. It's collaborated with Tencent, which is again the Chinese company. So India should come up with something where if you have an app, and if you are running that app in India, so the rights should be kept in India itself rather than giving the full rights for the outside countries, like especially China, when I make a point about it. So this is my only query. Like even if we catch Oyo also, Oyo was running first independently, but now it has a major stock with a Chinese company, with Didi Xinjing. So that's a small point I had from my side.
Okay, it was good. I have a few more people who wants to speak. I have Shailesh. He wanted to speak. Shailesh, you're there?
Yes, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
I wanted to make a couple of points about the whole stand-up that happened. One of the things that I would like to speak on first would be, was it anticipated, in the sense that what happened on August 5 in 2019, when we changed the status of Jammu and Kashmir as a state and made it into a union territory, we sort of asserted our territorial claims over Ladakh, and that included the Chinese territory. So in a way, did we expect a Chinese response? And a few journalists have said that, the Chinese were just waiting for the snows to melt, and June would be, or rather the summers in India would be a good time for them to start the incursion. So I want to understand, have we understood what the Chinese have been trying to signal to us, or have we failed to do that? Because if we just say that it's in response to the domestic crisis where the COVID-19 has put pressure on the political authority, and they are trying to divert their attention by opening up fronts on all the sides, but at the same time, by changing the status of the territory in Jammu and Kashmir at that time, we have the Chinese responded, either way. So I would say we have to pay more attention to that argument as well. And other than that, as far as the other things go, for example, what has China done during the pandemic? Even though it was fighting the crisis and it was investing its time in that, it was simultaneously also checking on its territorial claims. And one of the first incidents that happened was at Natuna Besar Islands in Indonesia. That was soon after the pandemic was brought under control, and Chinese started laying claims, and then the Indonesians started asserting it. And if I'm not wrong, it led to the leader of the country visiting the islands, Amit while the standoff was still fresh. And, so I feel we have to understand the motivations of China in this case, and they, I feel, always have had offensive defensive strategy. Wherever they feel their interests are being, even to the slightest level, threatened, they always assume that, more aggression is the answer to it. And to be frank, as far as we not wanting war is a good thing. Nobody wants war. But when push comes to shove, I think we should take a more stronger stand. And as far as our recognizing of or having full diplomatic relations with Taiwan, I would respectfully disagree with you, Mahesh, because my contention is, and this has not been raised by me, it's been raised by a journalist called Shekhar Gupta during his one of his shows, and he said that Taiwan also inherits the territorial claims on India that China has, if it ever ends up succeeding. And have they made it clear? And would it be, or rather, not so smart thing on our part to give them so much recognition, and yet the territorial claims would stay, where they would still claim Arunachal, have their territorial claim over Ladakh. And the third thing is, I would like to say is, China once upon a time said they are an outsider to the Kashmir whole issue with India and Pakistan, whatever has to do with Kashmir is between them. But then with Ladakh, they've always been there. You can't ever dismiss them. So, at the end of the day, by doing whatever they're doing, they are also in a way inserting themselves in the issue. So we have to think about those aspects as well. And as far as just thinking about it in a way that it's a way to divert attention and all, I feel they would have either done it, whether there was a COVID or not, a pandemic or not, they would have done what they've done in Ladakh, irrespective of the domestic situation. And as far as trusting US goes, the problem is with Modi, going towards the US or trying to, have a good relation, that's a brilliant thing strategically. But then the question is, how reliable is Trump? And as Sir Yume said, he has a good chance of re-winning. So, if I didn't misunderstand him, if he does, then how reliable can he be as a partner to us? That's one question I would put to him. Because as John Bolton's book has revealed, when they were considering sanctions on Iran, and they had given some waivers to South Korea, Japan, countries like that, that included Iran, India, to buy Iranian oil. And when the people who vouch for those countries, or rather look for those countries from the US side, they said, these are important countries. He said, I want it to be zero, cancel all the waivers. And then when someone personally asked him about India, he said, Modi, he'll be okay. So that seemed a bit casual attitude, especially in the context that he even discussed his re-election thing with Xi Jinping during the G20 summit. And, he said you should buy more farm products. So that's one thing. But one welcome thing I would say is whatever China is doing, it's encouraging its neighbors to push, its attempt to push them into corner has made them stronger in resisting it. The fact that Australia is talking about long-range missiles or defense capabilities and everything is itself a new welcome thing, I would say. And we'll have to see how the Five Eyes alliance and how they adapt to China's response. And yeah, I think that's all I would like to say. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Shailesh. I would like to take the response from both the panelists just for a minute, because we have a couple of more questions lined up. So
Absolutely. I'll be very quick.
Yeah, sure.
The first thing is that People's Republic of China has a diametrically opposite view of the world than the Republic of China that is in Taiwan. So the fact that what Shekhar Gupta says, see, we don't have geopolitics in this country. I'm very impressed by co-panelist, who has such a finesse in explaining, all the things that, the way the things are connected and the historical things that has happened. We never had a problem. The British government, which was ruling this country until when this, from 1912 to 1947, They never had a territorial issue with the Republic of China. The entire mess happened when the annexation of the Tibet happened, and that is from where we had gone southwards. So the question, answering the question that whether China is worried that Ladakh we did something, it is our internal matter. I may agree or not agree with my prime minister, but I don't want any other foreign prime minister to come and tell me what my prime minister should do or not do, because it is an internal matter. It's a constitutional, and all the benchmarks have been followed. Secondly, the China has no claim, neither legitimate claim on Ladakh nor Kashmir, and their claim comes back through the process of annexation of Tibet. Because they are Tibet, they are close to India. We had a buffer with China for a long time through Tibet. So the idea that because we did something, we use our territorial gains and we did everything, and that led to this is not a good idea. It never happened because of that. The only reason why China is doing right now is, as I said, there are too many enemies. They are too sidelined. Their industries are linked in special economic zone. Indian government is in talks with over 250 companies to relocate to India. It's not going to happen immediately. It's going to happen take at least 2 years to properly set up and to reap some dividend from it. Okay, but nevertheless, China as an economic power, as a place where people would love to invest, is over. It's finished. So now people are turning to India. And China wants to literally give one of the things what they want to do, apart from what my colleague has said. That is, every time they have an internal issue, they go and create a border dispute. Apart from that, one more thing what they are trying to do is try to signal the world that India is more vulnerable if you move out of a country. That could be another one thing. China is silly, as we see. Most of their moves are politically done. They may be clever, but everything they have done today, nobody wants to trust China. So, to answer that question, China has lost its credibility in the world. Every country on earth, every head of states wants somebody from China to take the accountability and pay for it. And because that is not happening, the world is against it. And now, because it is siding, art of war. Please says it very clearly. When you are weak, appear strong. When you are strong, appear weak. So right now, they are in the weakest position. They want to wield some pressure, and that is what they are doing. I hope this helps.
Your take on this, Dr.
Well, I think my co-panelists have rightly said we should not connect what happened with the Article 370 and then invasion or the interference of the Chinese into Ladakh. Well, if we see the development across 3,400 kilometers of border with China, now we have to accept that such kind of intrusion is going to be very often. China is just testing India at every front. Wherever they will find that India has a soft take on it, they will have a more say, they will have a more intrusion into Indian territory. And therefore, looking at the entire issue with India, China, or for that matter, whether India has any geopolitical stake in South China Sea or in our neighborhood, we have to, I would say, wait and watch. We have to, again, as rightly said, we have to see what government of India is going to take on this entire issue. And accordingly, with the calculation, we have to move ahead. Again, let me make it very clear. War with China is not a solution, nor blocking Chinese products in India is a solution. We have to learn the tactics of a Chinese. And Chinese, somewhere, I believe, has a big plan. As if I again quote what the Prime Minister of Tibet in exile has said, they have a plan for Tibet, they had it. And now their eyes are on these territories. Wherever they find a soft target, they will get into. Now, another very important perspective, why China is getting into these areas is because of water security. Please remember this. The rivers in these areas, I'm basically talking about Karakoram Pass and the glaciers. The rivers are going to be a very important tool, in fact, in coming time. And we have already seen how China have recently taken its own unilateral decision of blocking the other side of the Brahmaputra, which comes from China. We have to see that Chinese have a long plan and they are going to be there. And they will continue to test India after 2 years in an interval, I would say. Because if you see in 2017, we got a Doklam, then there's a peace in between, now we have a Galwan. So they will try and come every time. What we need is a strong policy. We need to have a better policy towards China to analyze how things are going to come up, and there has to be a strong intelligence when it comes to China's per se. So I think I have answered it very clearly when it comes to India-China issue.
Sure, sure. I think that answers the question. I have a couple of more questions in the comment section. We'll just read out. Our question, it should be a one-liner question. It is a one-liner question. Shouldn't take long time to answer. Ravi Verma says, can China divide like USSR today? Ravi Verma says, can China divide like USSR today? So
I think you must understand that is, China will lose Tibet in shortly. I can't say when, but it's they are going to lose their hegemony shortly, and that process is on. With all the diplomatic and the economic impact they have had, they are going to lose it, but it will not disintegrate. It will not be. It will go back to the same original China, which it was. Less the Tibet into it. So it will be a much smaller territory. And you must understand that one of the reasons why the Chinese annexed Tibet is because the two major rivers, which give the entire water supply to this China, they emanate from the Tibet. So they wanted to hold it. Second thing, we talk about war. India doesn't want war. We know that. We have no business of being in war for any time, except for 1971 during the Bangladesh liberation. We have never sent in our troops, and even after that, we have come out. If China goes for war, remember, the entire Chinese army, they will need a lot of fuel to run this kind of a war. And the fuel runs through the Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean, and host of South China Sea nation out there. So if there is a war, there will be a super naval embargo by all this nation, which will make literally difficult to get into the waters. We always undermine Modi, but I respect on him one front. You know how we solved the South China Sea bullying issue by these ships? He just gave them the the BrahMos supersonic cruise missile. So you may have the best cruise or ship on your with your fleet with you, but you have a cruise missile that can sink you, then you have a big problem. So China won't make the mistake of de-escalating it now that the Prime Minister has given a free hand to handle the situation on their own. We are a peace-loving nation. We have always been. It is not Modi's. It is the entire civilization's approach that we have lived for thousands of years without creating incursions in someone else's territory. And it is our travesty that we get our own children asking us questions like, have we handled our territorial things right or wrong in Jammu and Kashmir? Who did we snatch the Jammu and Kashmir from? It was our land. It has always been the land. Okay, so that question should have answered, should answer us that we will not take war. China cannot afford war. War will not happen. This will be a diplomatic show of thing. And in this diplomatic show of thing, you need to side with the people like Taiwan. Okay, and that's the only one legitimate way how you can put the Communist Party in place. Let a revolution start from within. There is a revolution there. We don't know anything about it because we have ignored it for a long time. I'm pretty sure the kind of people they have butchered, they have killed Muslims there ruthlessly. They have started to sterilize the Uyghur Muslims, which has in that part of China. This is not going to go without a consequence. Okay, so believe me, the People's Republic of China the fall has already begun. The China will not collapse. The Chinese people have been the oldest civilization. They will continue. There will be a regime change. That's all. How much time, I don't know, but that the process has begun, that is for sure. All pointers pointed to that. So China is no more a strong nation because to be strong, you need allies. Who is the ally for China? Show me one nation which will stand with China if there is any war or any escalation. There's nothing. So I hope that's my answer to it.
Thanks a lot. It was very insightful. On that note, we are actually nearing to the end of this seminar session. So I would like to go ahead and thank you, all of you who have participated in this webinar. It has been an excellent 1.5 hours of deep understanding of the topic today, a thorough dissection of trade and security and how they come together to create a lasting effect on the bilateral relations on both India and China. So as we are nearing to the end of this webinar, I would like to thank our esteemed panelists for their insightful views on the topic today. And I would also like to thank Dr. Tripathi. However, he is not present here at the moment. So he has sent us a message that I'm gonna read it out to you. And unfortunately, I have a lot of questions lined up, but since I was told that we only have 1.5 hours of window of arranging this webinar, so we have to wind up. And I'll go ahead and thank everyone, my fellow friends, my students, and Ram Rai for giving me this wonderful opportunity to host as well as moderate this session. I'll go ahead and read out the message that Dr. Tripathi has sent us, that he's indeed sorry that due to some connectivity issue, he was not able to link up with the webinar. And he is extending a warm thanks to Mr. Mahesh Prabhu and Dr. Mukund Narvenkar for giving their sharp insights and talks today. So he's saying that I'm sure it has added a lot to our existing understanding of how the present state of affairs in India and China is likely to play out. And I'm extremely agree with him that this is exactly what we have come to know after 1.5 hours of this session. And he also says that he's saying that this discussion has taken place at a very critical junction, not just in bilateral relations, but also how China would henceforth be taken as a factor in the world. Compliments to the Pinnacle for considering their program, and wish Ram Rai and his team a happy second anniversary of Pinnacle. Thank you all, and remain connected. This is the message from Dr. Tripathi, and I really thank Ram Rai and everyone who has been here in this webinar today. They're present, they gave their input. Everybody has been so very supportful. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.